Hello, welcome back. Well, today we're going to take a stroll down memory lane. What was it like a day in the life of a young elementary school student in the 70s and 80s? Good old Gen X. What was it like? What did you do? Maybe some of these memories you will remember as well. I hope so. That's the plan here, to kind of bring you back. Maybe you'll think about some things you haven't thought about in a very, very long time. Let's hope. We'll see. But it should be an interesting journey back to elementary school or maybe middle school, high school for some. You'll see some things that you haven't maybe seen in a long time. Or we'll talk about it. If you're listening, if you're watching, you'll see some pictures. If you're listening, you'll hear about it, and maybe that'll stir some memories. So here we go. Let's take a stroll down memory lane and go back to elementary school, way back when. So you had to start your day, right? Of course. Now, one of the best ways to start your day is with a nutritious breakfast. They always say that. You have to, start the day with a really good meal. Now, if my daddy wasn't cooking bacon and eggs when the eggs was cooked in the bacon grease or sausage grease, oh my goodness, that was good, then I may opt for some sugary goodness that was breakfast cereals. Now, I'll tell you something about the breakfast cereals back in the day. They were the absolute best. The 70s and 80s had the best breakfast cereals you will ever see. I don't think you can compete, honestly, because I don't think they'll let you put the stuff in there they used to put in there, especially amounts of sugar. Maybe some of them. I mean, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is still pretty good. But back in the day, we had some killers. And one of those, I have to say, is good old Waffle-Os. Waffle-Os was one of the greatest things that was ever invented. It was like putting waffles, covered in syrup, in milk. Really, it was. They were crunchy. You could just eat them right out of the box. They were amazing. But these things were really, really good. Absolutely loved them. I have to say, I have fond memories. I can almost taste them right now. But starting your day with good old Waffle-Os, and they used to have the commercials with the cowboy and the horse in the back, and these things were great. Maybe you remember those. They don't make them anymore. Unfortunately, there's a lot of these cereals they don't make anymore, but that one was one of the top. Now, if you didn't like waffles, maybe you like donuts, right? They had donuts. They had chocolate ones like this too. So you literally would put donuts in milk, basically, is what this was. They tried to pass it off as being like healthy, but spoiler alert, it wasn't as far as I can tell. But man, it was good. That's all that really mattered. It would, fuel you up for the day. I'll tell you that right now. Good old donut cereal. Now, some of the other ones that I used to love were, they used to have several of these. They had Frankenberry, Boo Berry, and Count Chocula, right? There's a couple of these. There was one with a mummy, I think, that I can't place. But there was also Fruit Brute. Now, Fruit Brute was one of these that you don't see as much anymore. When they bring these things back, every now and again you will. But the idea was they were different, like monsters of these cereals. And Fruit Brute, man, he was top notch. And marshmallows in there, it was so good. So that was one. Of course, I was also partial to Boo Berry as well. So either of those would have been great. But start your day out going to school with a nutritious breakfast. Now, so what's next? Well, you got to get ready, right? Right? You got to get ready because you're going to school. Of course, you got to get your Trapper Keeper loaded up with all your homework and all that good stuff. They had so many of these. I used to love these. Every school year, I would buy a new one of these or try to, or bring the old one back out, depending on, what the money situation was at that time back in the day. But these things were awesome. I used to love the way the Velcro sounded when you opened it. Amazing stuff. Really cool. But you would load this up, be ready to go, right? Of course, you had to pack your lunchbox. Everyone had one of these. You had different things. You had Star Wars lunchboxes, Dukes of Hazzard. I remember there was one. There was so many different types of lunchboxes, which they're kind of a collector's item today. I was always partial to Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man. Of course, he was amazing. I love Lee Majors. This was such a great show. So I had a $6 Million Man lunchbox, definitely. I think later I did have a Star Wars one as well. But $6 Million Man, fantastic, good stuff. You load this thing up with peanut butter and jelly. Now, I remember, and it seems odd now, but I remember loading these things up with a bologna sandwich, like bologna and cheese with mayo and mustard or something on it, and putting it in there. Now, from my understanding today, I think stuff will spoil, or maybe it's not as good. I don't know. Does bologna not like spoil or go bad in the time when you load it in the morning? And I don't know. It seems like I remember doing that though. I don't know. And just this metal lunchbox, but a lot of times it's PB&J. Throw some chips in there, maybe a cookie if you're lucky, or a Twinkie, or one of those great little Debbie cakes. Those were good. And the thermos, goodness gracious, the thermos. Now, the thing about these thermoses that I remember so well is after a while, they started to taste a little funky. No matter how many times you washed them, it kind of tasted like, licking a car bumper or something. But they were really cool. Everybody had a great thermos, but you had to load up your lunchbox before you got ready, right? Then you had to run out and catch the bus, the big cheese. There you go, the bus. You had to catch that, or, because your parents were probably working, doing things, so they didn't have time to take your butt to school. So you had to either walk or ride with friends. Sometimes they would do like carpool things, or get on the bus. And I rode the bus a lot, and I'm sure many of you did too. I used to ride one called 7670. That was the name. And the way that they used to number these things was the year it came out, it was made, was 1976. And undoubtedly it was the 70th one, or it had a number 70, but that's how they got the name. I used to ride 7670, never forget it. I had to know that bus number. You did. Now, there are some things in a bus that, in the morning especially, that are interesting to me. Riding the bus to school in the morning, you have plenty of time to think. I mean, you really do. So if there was, if we had an absence of mindfulness at times, back in the good old days, this made up for it like a lot, because you sat there and you thought, and you did, you didn't really have anything to do. You had to watch, the condensation kind of build up on the window, or watch some pencils rolling up and down the aisle, and, rooting for one to win a race or something. I mean, there was no phones, or there wasn't anything like that. I mean, you may talk to your buddy, but then some bus drivers didn't want you to talk or anything. And, I remember one time there was a complete, somebody threw a canned drink, like a Coke, out of the bus window, right? People used to litter back in the day, believe it or not. They did. And I guess they still do. They shouldn't, but I think that they probably do. But people used to throw stuff out the window a lot. So somebody decided to throw a can out. And it turned into an inquest, an investigation, because the person that threw it out wouldn't admit to throwing it out. So nobody else was going to tell on them. So it turned into this huge investigation, and it was a mess. But some bus drivers were very strict. They didn't want you to do certain things, and they would eyeball you in that big, rear view mirror they had. And they had a huge one. It was like a extra big, large size mirror. Anyway, but you did get to think, quite a bit. Back in those days. And then when you finally arrived at school, of course, there's wonderment everywhere, right? There's wonderment in the classroom. You got to come in, and some of the things you would look at is little things like this, right? This is where you sat. It looks something like this. This is not exactly, but you had a desk, not very comfortable, but it was where you sat. All the time. You sat there, you worked on your desk, and you had the little thing underneath where you kept your books and your different things. And I remember very well when I was in fourth grade, had Miss Foreman was my teacher in fourth grade. And there was a guy in our class, and he used to sell every morning, like literally sell. He would go to the store in the mornings, and he would buy Jolly Ranchers, and he would sell them. And he made a mint selling these things. Jolly Ranchers, bubble gum, like that old Bazooka bubble gum, I think it was. Used to sell these things and all this. It was he was an entrepreneur back in the day. His name was Lamar. What's his name? Yeah, he used to sell Jolly Ranchers and made a mint. I bought a bunch from him, constantly. So, but he kept those Jolly Ranchers. The reason I mentioned that, he kept those Jolly Ranchers underneath there in that little thing, right in there, that little basket thing underneath. So of course, you had to, sharpen your pencil. Everybody knows about this, a mechanical pencil sharpener. These things were like bolted to the wall, I guess, so nobody'd run off with them. I don't know. And you'd sharpen your pencil, a number 2 pencil, right? Now, did anybody ever use a number 1? I don't know. A number 2 pencil is what you had to have. And boy, if you didn't have one, it was not a good thing. It was like the end of the world was coming if you were taking that California Achievement Test or something, and you didn't have a number 2. It was like it was the end of the world. But anyway, pencil sharpener. Then you had to have, of course, a pencil box. Some people had them that looked like this, really nice and everything. Now, if you were like me, you probably had a cigar box, King Edward, right? A cigar box instead. The same thing. It's King Edward cigars, right? Or, maybe you had, Swisher Sweets or something. I don't know. But this is a box to put your stuff in, pencils and different things like that. Now, if you were doing handwriting, because they used to teach us how to write cursive. Now, I think they've brought that back, maybe. I don't know. They stopped doing the cursive thing for a while. But if you were learning to write in cursive, they would have these chalk things that they would put. And it had like 5 little things of chalk. And they would go up and down the chalkboard with these things. And then you would go up to the board and you would practice your handwriting, which I never was. My handwriting back then wasn't very good. So I actually made C's in handwriting, believe it or not. It kept me off the honor roll a few times. But anyway, this was one of the things that I never forget, that, the sound they made, the smell of the chalk. It was a whole thing. It was pretty wild. Now, speaking of smell and texture, the glue that you used to have in elementary school. Now, boy, let me tell you what, that glue was something. Some people had this kind of glue, which I remember using this kind of glue from time to time. Other people had the paste, different kind of like Elmer's glue paste or Elmer's glue all. That was kind of the one. But the different types of glue always brings back memories and the things that you did with it and the smell of the glue, especially that paste. Some people ate that paste. I don't know. I never partook in the eating of the paste, but some people did. So some of the other things that were really cool that I remember, Burger King had this thing for quite some time where they had, and this is one of those, you can still find these and buy them on eBay. Burger King had these erasers that had the head of the king, the Burger King, like, kind of a big deal. He was a celebrity, right? Oh, Burger King. They had these erasers that you would get at Burger King. And man, they were awesome. They were so cool. They were fantastic. These things were, you had these. I had different colors. I used to think they were so cool. And I don't know exactly why I thought they were so cool, but I did. So those Burger King erasers were top notch. And you can, if you're interested and you really want to stroll down memory lane and you remember those Burger King erasers, you can buy these things on eBay. People have them in perfect condition. Oh, and then of course, the crayons. You had the different packs. You had the little packs, you had the medium packs, and you had the big pack, right? The big pack had the built-in sharpener. My goodness, Crayola crayons, 64 pack. They had the built-in sharpener that was absolutely, this was like you had hit the lottery if you got these things. The gold and silver was in there. Everybody remember that? The gold and silver crayons were just, that's just awesome. Now, what we used to do with these, I remember, now, I don't think this is an across-the-board kind of thing, but I think that it may be unique to my elementary school. But we had this pipe, I remember, that was like scalding hot. This is the kind of stuff. I mean, we were in schools that had asbestos, and they had like, these pipes that were really, really, really hot. And it was, I wouldn't say dangerous, but it wasn't exactly safe either. But we used to melt these crayons on this pipe, is what we used to do. We would melt them on a pipe, and you'd see the melted crayons. It was kind of the mark of doing this kind of thing, but we would melt them. And also those sharpeners were absolutely amazing. They were really, really cool. A lot of fun. You had these stickers. A lot of people bought stickers in what they used to call the supply room. They were scratch and sniff. I remember these. I totally remember these stickers. They smelled like what they said they smelled like. I always thought that was amazing technology that they had to get them to do that. I don't know how, but I guess there's ways. Science is an amazing thing. You also had, which these I loved, the NFL team pencils. If you had the NFL team pencils, you were this was like you were almost rich in an elementary school way. These were fantastic. They were number 2, of course. They had to be number 2. I'm still wondering about number 1 or number 3 or 4. I don't know if they have those or not. I don't even know what number 2 means, honestly. I'm just, I don't even know. But these were so cool. And also, if you went we used to go up to Kmart to get these things. But the NFL helmets, little plastic helmets, you got them out of it's like a bubblegum machine. You got these things out, and you tried to get. I always wanted the Cowboys because I was a big Dallas Cowboy fan back then. I always loved the Cowboys. I think it was because I had kind of a thing for the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, if truth be told. But this was really cool. And if you had these, I mean, whoa, man! And if you could get a collection of them, this is really cool. And you can still buy these too. Some people sell these on like eBay and stuff, but the memories these things have are absolutely just priceless. So priceless. Anyway, this was really cool stuff. Now, some of the other things you may experience on your day in school is, of course, if they're making copies, and you've seen this. This was this picture here, if you're viewing this, was from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which this was so perfect. And what I love about this movie is the accuracy here. Because if you were in the room and they just made Xerox copies, or they wasn't even Xerox back then, it was a completely different kind of copy machine, but they had this smell. I mean, every time and anytime they brought in, it was warm. Number one, the paper was warm, and you had to smell immediately. Now, I don't know what the deal was, but and I'm sure you can smell it right now if you know what I'm talking about. This is the first thing you did. They brought in fresh copies. There you go. You're totally going to smell that. You're going to smell those copies almost immediately. Now, who remembers the Weekly Reader? Oh, yes, the Weekly Reader. My goodness, this was so cool. Every time this came in, you were fired up. You were ready to go. Get that Weekly Reader. Everyone loved this. It was like the thing. Now, every now and again, they used to have hearing tests. Did y'all remember these things? These hearing tests were, they would take you in. You had to sit in front of a teacher or someone that was administering this test, and they would do sounds. You had to raise your hand, and they had these, funky earphones they put on you to make sure that you could hear, I guess. I mean, I'm not 100% sure why they did these things. They used to do this, and they used to always check you for scoliosis all the time. And different things they used to do, but I remember those hearing tests, and we used to have to do those. But those earphones were something, they really were. And then, now speaking of hearing something, the old projectors, when it was time to watch one of those educational videos, they used to bring in those reel-to-reel projector things, and they used to run the film through that thing, and it made that noise the whole time. And they used to pull down the screen, and you'd sit there, and you were talking about, that is one of the things, if I'm thinking about today, if I want to go to sleep, if I can imagine that projector in maybe a warm room, I'm sitting next to that pipe I'm melting those crayons on, and I would go to sleep in a second. I mean, in a second, these things. And I think that was almost a call to go to sleep, those old videos, because they were not. I can't remember ever watching the reel-to-reel things that were ever of any interest, really. Except now, I will say this. In driver's ed in high school, they used to show the blood flows red on the highway kind of things, to scare you into thinking that as soon as you start driving, you're going to die. So, I mean, to make you drive safe, I guess. But then in elementary school, you didn't, not so much. They were kind of boring. Then if you got to go to the library, right? You got to go to the library, then you had, of course, the Dewey Decimal System. There you go. So you had to look up your book, which people actually would have to find the number, go and find the book, and yeah, there you go, the Dewey Decimal System. I'm not sure. Now everything's online so much. I don't even know if these. I haven't been to the library. Somebody tell me. I don't know. I mean, maybe these are still there. I'm not 100% sure. But back then they were, for sure. And the library was always a place you wanted to go, and you tried really hard. I remember once there was this was high school, not elementary school, but me and a buddy of mine really wanted to go to the library because we got out of study hall, and it was much more fun to go to the library, and hang out, and maybe you would see some people you want to talk to, especially those of the opposite sex at times, girls that would be rolling around, and you got a chance to talk to them in the library, until you got shushed, which happened a lot. But we used to get a pass every day to go to the library, and one day we didn't talk to the teacher, so we decided we were just going to write our own pass, but it didn't work out so well. We ended up getting in a bit of trouble for that one because we forged the pass. Yeah. So it was one of those things that happened. And I remember going to the office to get my punishment because they used to paddle you back then, and I was like 18. I mean, so I wasn't technically an adult when this happened, but I made sure to pad my pants, so to speak. Because it happened on one day and we had to go in the next. So I saw this coming, so I wore several different pairs of underwear to pad it. Because man, when they got the paddle out, you knew it. Anyway, all right. So the next thing that is like at recess, if you got recess and you were able to go right and have some fun, do some things, you got to play what we used to call war ball. This says if you can't hear this picture. If you can't hear it, and in the picture, of course, you can hear that sound. You can feel that hitting you. You can smell the rubber, right? Those things were so cool, and they made a sound when you threw them. But we used to call it war ball. Some people call it dodgeball. It was so much fun. I know that they don't like doing that today, and 6 1 half dozen the other. How you feel about that? But we used to have fun. I will say that the key to war ball to me was you had to be able to catch, because if you could catch, you'd get somebody out. And also, if you could find one of those, they used to have a smaller size of these balls. So you had like one that you could knock down people that were throwing things at you, so you could fend off predators, right? So that was kind of a key to the whole thing. And then if you got to go out on the playground, of course, you had the monkey bars. These things were just a broken arm waiting to happen. There is no doubt in my mind. This is one of those things that you definitely had to be careful on. People broke more arms on these things, but you had to climb to the top. And there was like some back and forth going on these. There was something else. I mean, but we also had torture devices, of course, out there. You had the metal slides that were, if it was hot, they would burn you. I mean, it was like you were being branded by something extremely hot. These things were torture devices, is what they were. That metal slide, I will never forget burning my legs on these things, and they didn't. Sometimes you got stuck because they didn't. Those were something. Torture devices for real. Of course, square pizza. If you didn't bring your lunch, like the PB&J and the spoiled bologna I talked about earlier, square pizza was the jam. It was the stuff, right? Square pizza was some people loved the square pizza. It was all right. I'm not gonna like dismiss it, but I mean, it wasn't my favorite thing, but it was okay. The hamburgers were pretty good back then. The desserts were always great. My mother used to work in the lunchroom, and she made the desserts, so I always got extra dessert. Shh, don't tell nobody. So anyway, these were great. Of course, you had for dessert. Speaking of, sometimes you get ice cream, and you got the little ice cream with the wooden spoon. These were so good with the wooden spoon. I mean, it was like you were getting something special with that. I'm sure that a lot of you remember that. Those were fantastic, right? Now, after all is said and done, you would go home. You'd ride the bus home, and you would be back at the house, and then things would, liven up a little bit. Maybe you would get out and ride your bike, and of course, do some, Evel Knievel type stunts, jump over some of your friends, maybe break an arm or two. That's the way it went. Maybe ride to the next county, right? We used to go so far on these, and if you had a motorcycle, it was even better. Because I started riding dirt bikes when I was like in fourth grade, and we used to go everywhere. Literally, it was amazing the ground that we covered back in those days. It was really something. Now, if you had to go somewhere with your parents and or your daddy or whatever, you'd load up in the pickup truck. Everybody got in the back. I remember coming home from football practice, baseball practice. Back in those days, we used to load, as many people as you could get in the back of a pickup truck and drive down the road. Nobody thought anything about it. So you definitely were in the back of a pickup truck a lot. It happened quite frequently. It was sort of where you wanted to go. You would always jump in the back of the truck. I remember riding in the back of a truck going down the interstate. True story. Yep. Done it a few times. Yeah. Anyway, so that was fun. And if you got a chance to talk on the phone to maybe your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, it was always a lot of fun. You had the long cord that would kind of wrap around and you could move. It was like your version of the cordless phone, but it had a long cord. So it was really cool. And I'll tell you something, speaking of earlier when I was talking about mindfulness, another thing that you would really think and get in kind of connect with yourself was when you tried to call, maybe let's say you had a new potential interest of a significant other, kind of, boyfriend, girlfriend kind of thing, and you would get on the phone. Now, back then, it was mostly the boys calling the girls. The girls didn't call the boys as much, but not to say they didn't, but it just didn't happen as much. So like I say, if I was going to call a girl that I just met, and I was nervous, and I would dial all the numbers up until the last one, and then hang up, and then do it again, dial all the numbers to the last one, hang up, and keep doing it over and over again. And you really, start thinking about yourself a lot at that point. Sometimes you'll even let it ring once and hang up. They didn't have caller ID or anything. You had to really build up your confidence. So it was a whole thing. It was. Maybe some of you have had that happen. And of course, you get another torture device after school. See, the metal slide is over there, and then you have the merry-go-round. They call this. I don't know. But this thing would get hot, sling you off, break an arm. You'd get sick and throw up. It was so many different things that this would bring. So that was fun as well. And then you would end the night. Maybe you would be able to, depending on what year it was, into the 80s, maybe, let's say, and you may go get you a new video at the video store. We used to have a Video Express. I know Blockbuster was a popular one. And another thing, speaking of mindfulness, was waiting for these things to rewind, because you had to rewind it or they would charge you 50 cents. And they would do it. They would charge you 50 cents. I used to work at a Video Express, and it was a thing. If you didn't rewind that thing, they would put 50% charge. 50 cents, right? So you had to wait for it to rewind, and it seemed like it took forever. And it made that noise. And in that time, you could contemplate your existence very well. try to understand the meaning of life as that tape rewound to the end. So that pretty much is a day in the life of an elementary school student, Gen X specifically. But maybe some of you, baby boomers, maybe some millennials, maybe that's something that you have experienced as well, right? So I hope that you've enjoyed this stroll down memory lane, and we will see you next time.